This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. Well, we've got another exciting episode here this week, but I want to, first of all, thank the Friends of the Magic Word. Those are the ones who, of course, help us with their financial pledges and their patronage each month and help keep this podcast going. This week, I want to thank three people who are already Friends of the Magic Word, and that is John Custer, Bill Flanagan, and Joe Hanasek. Thank you very much, guys, for your ongoing patronage by donating to the Magic Word podcast. I had published a video on YouTube recently and posted it in a few places, and they were the first ones to come to the aid, financial aid that is, and answer the call and had sent some financial donations our way. So thank you guys very much, and for the rest of you, please consider, if you have the time and money, to please help us with our ongoing efforts, because we have ongoing expenses from month to month. Well, this coming week will be my birthday. That is on the 21st of November, on next Monday. And to celebrate that, one of the things I'm going to do, I was asked by Jeff McBride to be, I guess, a guest faculty member or just a guest speaker. I guess in this case, I would like to consider myself a faculty member, but that's maybe too much to wish for. It's such a prestigious school that he runs, and I was so honored when he asked me to talk, and I will be discussing the Magic Word podcast about how this has come about and some of the speakers we've had over the past. And I should say speakers, I mean the guests we've had certainly have been just phenomenal. Some of the advice that they've given, and just take some questions from many of the people who are the students who tune in from week to week. This is something that Jeff has been doing for a very long time, and I think has, I don't know, he's got 700 episodes or 600 or something like that, these Monday night online shows that have been recorded. So I'm very pleased and honored and flattered for him to have asked me and for me to spend the time with him and all of his listeners and guests. So if you are not a member and have not subscribed to his online school, it's worth going over to check out his online school to see how that you can participate then as well. You will learn a lot, I am certain. His school is unparalleled, and you don't have to be in Las Vegas to take classes. He teaches these online all day long and for people all over the world. Well, anyhow, please join us if you can. That is going to be Monday, November 21st at the Jeff McBride Online School. This week, we are going to speak with another longtime friend, someone I've known since the early 1980s, and that's David Ginn. I have to thank him so much, as many of us do, because he has contributed so much to the world of children's entertainment with his books, his DVDs, his lectures, and as a dealer when he's gone around the world and helped to promote entertainment for children, whether it's going to be scout banquets or birthday parties, school shows, libraries, whatever and wherever that children are congregated, whether they're family shows or just exclusively for children. He's the one that has always been the guy. I would probably say whenever I was getting started in doing all of the birthday and children's shows that I was doing, there was always at least one thing from his many books that I had to include. Of course, each of us put our own spin on there, but a lot of times everything that he has said, the pattern that was included with the tricks, were all excellent. I didn't have to add too much to it because it was already perfect as it was. But just some great ideas, some things I still use even in adult shows now, whether I'm performing for a corporate audience or whether I'm at a trade show or cruise ship or wherever, there are still things that will work perfectly that were taught in some of those books. I was amazed to think that he has over 100 books that he has authored, let alone the DVDs and everything else that he's done. His volume of work is amazing. And so that's why I call him the king of kid shows, because he has done so many and contributed so much to all of us. In this episode, you're going to be hearing him talk about someone else who was his mentor and someone, I guess I should say, person before him, and that is J.B. Bobo, who was the king of the kid shows back in his day. And then he also, for a while when he was in college, had befriended Doug Henning, and they traveled around Europe, and he is writing a lot of these stories down now, which are published in the Linking Ring in his regular column that he publishes there, along with several other stories. Well, there are some things here that he talks about this week that have not seen print and may not see print ever. So it's kind of behind the scenes. And also he talks a little bit about his revised website, which I would highly recommend that you would go and check that out too, because he has a lot of free stuff that's there where that you can watch videos, you can watch some lectures, get some ideas and tips and everything. It's just amazing. He said, I'm not there to sell, I'm just there to offer the benefit of my knowledge and experience over the years. So I highly recommend that you go and check out his website, which is Ginn Magic Shop. That's Ginn magicshop.com. Go check it out. I think you'll be glad you did. Well, enough of this preamble. Let's get right into the meat of this episode. Please welcome my guest this week, the king of the kid shows, David Ginn, here on The Magic Word. We were in Atlanta, Georgia this week with our guest, and had to come all the way to Atlanta to get a chance to see him. It's been a long number of years, too long of years. In fact, he came up behind me to tap me on the shoulder and say hello, and we first met in 1980, I think it was, or so. And so we've been friends for a long time, but don't get to see each other very often. And I say tap me on the shoulder. We are in Atlanta at the IBM convention. He lives in Marietta, Georgia, which is a suburb. Is that right? Where are you, actually? What's your... Loganville, sorry.
There's a big difference.
My mistake. I apologize. Here is my friend and yours, kid show extraordinaire, Mr. David Ginn. Hey there, David.
Hello, Scott. Good to see you across the room.
Yes, from across the room, and it's awfully good to spend a little bit of time up close and personal then with you to have a chance to talk about so many things. And boy, I don't know where to begin other than it's great to catch up with you, because I do want to talk a little bit about Doug Henning, because here we are at the IBM convention. We're talking a little bit about that, and also about some other stuff you've just completed. This book during the last couple of years of lockdown, like the book that you put together is not a compendium of other books, or rather a reprint of other books.
No, it's not.
So you have been inspirational to me and to so many other magicians whose careers have been launched and have been successful, and still use many of the things in the books that you've written. I kind of jokingly early said, what have you had, about 15 or 20 books? And you said a little over 100. So how many books actually have you written?
Oh, it's like 101 or 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Long ago, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool if I could write 100 books? Mm-hmm. And then year by year it got closer. And now I count my DVDs too, because they take writing, they take work, and filming and acting and all that stuff. But I can't beat Ian Adair. He's written over 300 books.
Oh my goodness!
General public and magicians' books, pamphlets. So I'll never catch up with Ian Adair. Mm-hmm. But
was Abra one of his publications?
No, that was a different man.
Okay.
I mean, he wrote some things for Abra. Mm-hmm. But he and I talk about this from time to time too. He's still alive and relatively well.
Mm-hmm. Over in England.
Mm-hmm. Taking it easy.
Do you travel much anymore outside of the U.S.? I mean, you used to travel around the world, didn't you, doing some shows?
Well, I've been to about 25 foreign countries where I lectured, mostly lecture tours. Hawaii 10 times and only paid for it once. Mm-hmm. The rest were all work-related, conventions, lectures, and that kind of thing.
Right.
And I've lectured in just about every major city and minor city in the country. I've been to all 50 states, and throw in Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of foreign tours, Italy, Spain, France, Germany, England, Scandinavia. And now at this moment here in July of 2022, this is the closest I've been to the airport in 3 years. We're right here at the airport hotel, Hilton. Yeah. And I really don't care, because I've loaded suitcases and gone to the airport enough in my career. The pandemic kind of did me the favor of showing me what it would be like if I were not doing 7 or 8 school shows a week. Mm-hmm. Because I built my career doing school shows, and at the height, I was doing over 400 a year. And then I slacked off and got to 300 and 250 and so forth. The year before the pandemic, I did 94. I stopped pushing so hard. I didn't have to do them, but I still liked doing them. Then all of a sudden, the bottom dropped out, and all the performers in our country were out of work. In the county where I live, you literally could not go in and do any kind of program, puppets, book talk, anything.
Right.
So
they probably weren't even allowing parents into some of the schools.
That was pretty sticky too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My daughter's a music teacher at a school, and that first year I really couldn't go in there and sign in and go back and see her. Sometimes I'd drop something off and at the front door or the back door, and that was about it. But that gave me a chance to clean out the workshop, to throw out a lot of stuff, to do some writing, to produce those stories about Doug Henning and me. That was in a manuscript form for my second book that Mickey Hades published. And back in 1972, that is 50 years ago, he chose not to use the chapters about Doug Henning and me traveling around Europe together. Because you got to understand, we were in nobody. This was my second book, and Doug
he didn't come into play
was still
until
doing little shows.
Right.
Yeah, he didn't get going till about 73, 4, or 5. I forgot.
I think it was about 75. Before I get into that, though, by the way, that I like to ask people who ever have traveled as much and extensively, who have different places, where your favorite location is. I mean, I've talked with several people who are cruise ship guys and also trade show guys who work around the world, and they have some favorite places of what is it?
I've enjoyed England a whole lot. Mm-hmm. Common language, sort of.
Exactly.
I've enjoyed Blackpool as a convention better than anything.
Mm-hmm.
When you've got 3,500 magicians from all over the world, and you run even a single dealer booth, you're going to sell things.
Right.
If you have things that are not card tricks. And I carry children's magic and stage magic.
Yeah.
And so I stand out with this colorful line of tricks and things. And I can carry 12 of a trick and start showing it one after another and sell out the first day of that. And then I turn to another trick. So I've enjoyed that a lot. Plus, the last 4 or 5 times I've been to Blackpool, my grown daughter, the school teacher, has gone with me, and we've had a father-daughter week. And that was good for both of us. She got to see what I do. I mean, she's been around it all my life, but, in her grown-up years, to see that I have some respect in other parts of the world.
Yes.
People think I'm somebody. And if you ask my wife, I'm the guy who's supposed to be home carrying out the garbage.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, England would be my top. I've enjoyed Australia and New Zealand.
Once again, common languages help a lot too.
Yeah, that does help.
Yeah.
But I've learned to lecture in any language with a translator. I mean, I've lectured in Spain, Spanish, Italy, Germany,
right,
with a translator, and I got into a certain rhythm. I guess I've had a translator at least 100 times.
And over the years, the kinds of things you sell, of course, are, I would say, proprietary. There are things that are from your show. They're used, commercial kind of things that you recommend, and you manufacture yourself for the most part, right?
Generally, I base what I sell, at least on those tours, on things that I've used myself in hundreds of shows, and therefore when I show them, I'm showing you the routine I used.
Mm-hmm.
Give you an example. Now, my wife Lynn and daughter Autumn, when Autumn was about 10 years old, they went on a lecture tour with me all over Germany. I think that was, what year would that have been? 90-something. Anyway, maybe Autumn was more like 13, 14. Anyway, I brought on that tour 15 of the Peachy Keen sponge birthday cakes. They fit into a 6-inch Marcy dove pan.
Mm-hmm.
So you pretend to be cooking a cake. When you lift the lid off of the dove pan, here's a 15-inch tall cake. And I took 15 of those, and a fellow I knew there who kind of engineered the tour said, "David, I don't know how well these are going to go." I said, "Why not?" He said, "This is obviously an American birthday cake. A German birthday cake is one layer, about 4 inches tall, basically kind of flat.
It doesn't have layer on layer the way that...
layer on layer. And it's not necessarily colorful. Like this was like red and yellow and green and
I remember that.
a purple candle. Well, I sold all 15 of them. I did I did 7 or 8 lectures. I sold basically about 2 per lecture. But there's another part of that. I had been doing Dan Garrett's banana trick, multiplying bananas, starting around 1978, whenever Dan started making them.
He could hardly keep those things in stock.
I think he estimated he made 100,000 of them.
That's probably a fair estimate. Yeah.
With an electric knife, and he painted them too.
So many times that I have seen him at my house, and he's there with scissors making these things.
Well, let me tell you what really happened. Now I know when the tour was. The tour was the spring of '90.
Okay.
The Berlin Wall came down in 1989, November of '89.
Okay.
So 4 months later, we made this lecture tour in March. And my wife and daughter were with me on that. They would help me sell, and they would go off and do other things while I'm lecturing because they've seen it over and over.
Yeah.
I took 100 sets of Dan Garrett's bananas, 100 sets. I had about 20 sets of his multiplying carrots. It's the same trick, just a carrot.
Yep.
And 10 sets of pickles.
Okay.
Now, let me tell you what happened in reverse order. I sold 1 set of pickles.
The whole
out of
tour?
10.
Oh, the whole tour?
I came home with 10. I came home with 9.
9, yeah.
My friend told me that German people do not like to do magic tricks with food that they touch, that goes into their mouth. You pick up a pickle by your hand,
interesting.
You eat it, you're touching it. Germs, dirty, I don't know. But
so Tom Mullica's
right.
act probably would not have gone over there when he's doing the cigarettes and mouth and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's different.
Because this sounds like an oral fixation thing.
Carrots, all the carrots sold, 20 sets, because of the rabbit association in magic.
Yeah.
But what about the bananas? 100 sets of bananas, and that's what I showed.
Mm-hmm.
I just said I also have carrots and pickles. Every set of bananas sold.
Mm-hmm.
All 100 of them. Probably could have sold another 20 or 30, but I was averaging selling, what would that be, about 15 sets per lecture.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Here's why. In November of '89, when the Berlin Wall was torn down, for the first time in all those years, the East Germans could come across the border, cross into West Germany,
right,
and buy fresh produce.
Oh, that's interesting.
And what was the number one item that they couldn't get in East Germany but
Bananas.
could in West? And it was bananas.
Now, that is a fascinating story.
So here I am 4 months after that happened doing a trick with the bananas. Every German guy who bought it would be playing off that fact that was intrinsic in the people who lived there. They didn't even have to explain it. Pull out the bananas, and we couldn't get these for a long time, but man, we can get them left and right now. Boom, boom. And then you change.
Wow.
I was changing the bananas into a big banana, about 18 inches long, a big sponge banana. And I probably only had a dozen of those. Oh, they were gone the first lecture. So,
wow.
Something that I just took for granted that I got and use all the time. At home, I buy bananas twice a week. I eat a banana every morning with my cereal.
But if they are something that are almost forbidden fruit, if you would, quite literally, they didn't have an Easter.
They just couldn't get it. They couldn't cross over the Berlin Wall. And
But even though that is a fruit you eat with your hand, you do have to peel it to get to it.
Yeah, but you're not touching the
banana.
You can if you want to, but you usually hold the peeling, or you slice it and put it on your cereal and you eat it with a spoon.
Right.
So, and the carrot.
Interesting.
Put that aside. Carrots you can eat with your hand, but rabbits eat carrots.
Now, when we were talking a little bit earlier, I had said you were the modern-day J.B. Bobo because Bobo had been traveling about doing school shows just much like you had, and he was traveling pretty much in area throughout Texas and the South, and then he wrote the seminal book on coin magic, and he had another book you were talking about then as well.
The Bobo Magic Show.
Magic Show, which essentially was his show, and
School show.
But go ahead and tell the story.
He had 5 different school shows. And year one, he would do show number 1. Next year, he'd rotate to 2, 3, 4, and 5. And by the time he got back around to 1, pretty much the elementary school, which was generally K through 5, the kindergartners are now in the 5th grade. They forgot the show from 5 years ago.
Sure.
So he would occasionally add stuff in. I knew Bobo. And he and I were sitting at a convention one time, and he said, David, in fact, it was before he wrote his kid show book. And it was in 1980 when I had published Gene Gordon's book. And I said, I would like to do your book just like Gene Gordon's, give it first-class treatment and all. And he said, I've already kind of made a commitment to Francis Marshall at Magic Incorporated, and they're going to do it. And they didn't do it the way I would have done it. but what's done is done.
Sure.
However, he said to me, he says, you know what? I knew that I had reached a certain plateau when I started pulling into a school and there was a sign out front that today at 10 a.m. is the Bobo Magic Show. It didn't say magic show, it said Bobo Magic Show. And or I'd see on the school calendar, it said Bobo Magic Show, 2 o'clock Wednesday. And that was a very interesting comment to me, because in 80, I had been doing school shows for 7, 8, 9 years. I've been out of the Army since 71. And about 5 years later, I started arriving at some schools, and the sign out front would say David Ginn Magic Show, 10 a.m. Wednesday. I would go into schools and I'd be standing there talking to a secretary and look down on her calendar, which had things written on it, and I'd see not Magic Show written on it, but David Ginn written on it.
Yeah.
And what Bobo said came back to me. Now, Bobo, in his early days, there are differences between him and me. He made it up. He made up what he did. I developed what I did. He would get up at 4 in the morning, drive with his wife Lillian for 2 or 3 hours, stop and eat breakfast somewhere, and then go on and do 2 or 3 school shows one day, and then drive all the way back home. They virtually never stayed in motels overnight. They were not going to spend the money.
So they were what they were called 100-milers, I guess, or whatever. You kind of within a certain...
They went more like 200 miles.
Okay.
But in his
Always
early
come back.
days, the way he collected all those tricks for the coin book, Modern Coin Magic, he met magicians along the way, and they showed him tricks, because he was out on the road, and they'd show him tricks after shows, maybe have dinner together before he went to the next town or the next morning. And so he collected all this material and wrote the book. By the same token, Gene Gordon, back in the 20s and 30s, traveled all over the country doing magic shows with some other performers, and he would meet magicians all over. And he, of course, had already started the IBM with
Len
Ventus. But Len stayed in an office in Winnipeg, Canada, for the most part. He was not traveling. And Gene, in the first year or two, told me that he signed up over 700 people, magicians, to join the IBM back in 22 and 23, because he met so many of them out on the road.
Right.
And that's the way the organization really got started.
Is by him taking the magic to the cities and actually signing them up.
In schools, he played. Gene Gordon played Hollywood High School, if you can believe that. And he said back in like 1930 when he played it, they had a couch that would seat maybe 4 people. A couch, a sofa, sitting in the middle of the stage. And the principal, an assistant, and a couple of other fuddy-duddies would come up and sit on the couch and face the audience behind the performer in order to keep the audience in control. And he had to do his show in front of these people.
Wow.
Which I would find awfully intimidating.
It would be, because they're trying to make sure that they're disciplining the kids not to get out of control, and yet you're trying to get them
to laugh and have a good time.
Right. Wow.
I wish I could have been there. But
what an interesting situation that
back
must
to
have been.
Bobo, Bobo did a lot of stuff. I saw him lecture and show some of the stuff. I've seen him perform, and he.
What was his era, would you say? He was probably 40s to the 60s? Late
30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I think in the 70s, 80s, maybe he was still doing some shows. Lillian, his wife, she was hardly on stage. She would walk out and take things away, bring things to him, but he did the whole show, and she packed up. By the time the show was over, within 5 minutes, they could close up their suitcases, walk out the door.
Because she was packing as he was finishing each trick.
Packing as they went. In other words, he wouldn't do a trick that was a whole lot of reset as the last trick. He might do linking rings at the end, and then
each throw them
out the door.
Did he live in Texarkana for some reason? I was thinking
Texarkana.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's Texas or Arkansas, because that town is divided by 2 states.
Kind of like Kansas City.
But one of my pleasures was way back on one of those lecture tours. I'd say 85, 6, 7. I actually lectured in Texarkana, and I had a big crowd of 8 people, and 2 of those people were Bobo and Lillian.
Wow.
Sitting on the front row and enjoying
Yeah.
it. He probably bought a few things,
Yeah.
But he saw something in me that pleased him.
Wow.
Maybe I was just a younger version of him,
Sure.
breaking into the school show market.
Sure.
And I traveled in my career over the entire state of Georgia, a little bit into Alabama, Tennessee, Carolina. But
You pretty much stayed to the south.
yes, I've done school shows as far away as Vancouver or Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I've done one in Hollywood or L.A. When I was off doing the convention, somebody, would you come do a school show? And so I would. It's much easier doing those at home when I have my own car, my own sound system,
Sure.
my own rabbit, my own equipment. Once you start flying to do something elsewhere, you've got to cut things like that out. At home, I can carry anything I want. I was carrying stocks of Zanzibar, for instance. The first time I carried it, I dismantled it every time. Stupid. About 10 years later, I recycled it. I put it together at the beginning of the year and laid it in the back of the car and took it out completely assembled. One year, I carried a Mac Magic Princess Flying Carpet. I just threw a big cover over it, told the boys to carry it in. They always gave me students to unload. I said, carry this table in and put it in the middle of the stage.
Yeah.
And then I'd float a little girl on it while playing Phantom of the Opera song, Music of the Night.
Music of the Night, right.
Very dramatic. And I played that as a dramatic thing. But most of the school shows I did alone. Back in the 70s, up till about 81, but my first 10 years, for high schools, I carried an assistant. And we did the sword basket, sub-trunk, a blade box, depending on which year, only one illusion per show.
Yes. The rest was all audience participation, pretty much.
Things like that. But after about 81, I found it was just easier to do school shows, whether it be high school, middle, or whatever, by myself.
What kind of a vehicle did you drive? Or did you have a van that you pulled behind you, a fifth
days,
wheel?
No,
or?
I never pulled it. When we did a big illusion show back in the late 80s and 90s, I did pull a trailer because we carried 7 illusions. And but no, I worked out of a car or a station wagon or a minivan.
Okay.
Most of the stuff fit in the back, and I either carried birds or rabbits.
With the number of miles you were traveling back and forth, and it sounds like you were kind of doing what Bobo was and going back home a lot in the evening then as well.
I was going back home all the time.
So how often did you have to change vehicles? Did you trade every other year or something, or how often did you?
3 or 4 years.
Oh, you kept it for like over 100,000.
Sometimes for 2 and 3 years, and have a new car every 3 years.
So how many 100,000 miles did you put on those vehicles?
I have no idea. I think the longest I kept one was about 170,000 miles.
Oh, okay, interesting.
I'm not a mechanic, so I didn't. I don't even change my own oil.
Yeah, well, me either
and I
anymore.
don't apologize for that. It's just I don't do those things like
Yeah.
that. You got to know what you know.
Well, now, when we were talking about traveling, and earlier you had alluded to traveling with Doug Henning, and this was before that he was well-known then as well. So, I also know that you have an article that is in the Linking Ring that runs on a regular basis. How long has that been running, the series? Or
You have to go back to the fact that Bev Bergeron was writing a
yeah,
monthly column.
cutting up jackpots. Yeah.
And then he passed away. And Sammy said, can you write me a couple of things to fill in? So I wrote him 4 articles about 4 people that I knew and stories about them. Those were Bev Bergeron, Mark Wilson, Gene Gordon, and Harold Taylor. And he knew about this Doug Henning Association, 25 years ago, and had asked me if I'd eventually write it. And I said, I don't think I want to do that because I don't want to make it like I'm trying to ride on Doug Henning's coattails. I've never promoted our friendship.
Or used it for any marketing advantage or...
No, I've never, never. I'm not that kind of person.
I know.
I'm not the magician who will go and do a celebrity party for some movie star or something and get my picture taken with that person so that I'll become famous by association.
Yes. Unlike Uri Geller. Uri Geller had told me that he wanted people to say, who is that with Marilyn Monroe or whoever, but then eventually they would want people to say, who is that with Uri Geller?
Yeah. I've never liked that approach.
Okay.
I haven't, I was in the Army with the guy who was a member of the four-man group called the Tokens, The Lion Sleeps Tonight, and he and I were friends. Another guy who worked with me in the Army was Joel Higgins, who was on Silver Spoons with Ricky Schroeder and made a big hit, and Broadway shows and whatnot. And, I just don't make a big deal out of that.
Yeah, right.
Because to me, they're just regular people.
So you didn't want to talk necessarily about Doug Henning and they say...
But the Doug Henning thing, finally,
you'd written about that already, it sounded like, and Mickey Hades said, cut that out.
I wrote it 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And Mickey Hades didn't want to put it in the book.
Yeah.
And he told me, he says, this is just a travelogue about two college boys, and nobody knows Doug Henning. He says, I know him, but nobody knows him, so it doesn't have the meaning. And then during the pandemic, I dug those chapters out as I was literally cleaning and throwing things out, recycling papers. And told Sammy I'd found them. The stories ran about 60 or 80 typed pages. Mm-hmm. And I am blessed with a long memory. That's what I call it. My grandfather had it. I'm sure my dad did. I suspect my daughter may. But I remember things in detail way back. And so when I decided I would do those stories, because I had time on my hands during the pandemic, I just started in chronological order and wrote them. And I had 3 references. I had the manuscript I wrote 50 years ago. I had my diary that I carried with me on the trip. It was a day-to-day diary, what I ate, what train we got on, all kinds of observations, and I had a little notebook, too, that I wrote things in, too. So with those 3 things and my memory, which kicked in and things came back to me, and the beautiful thing is the Internet now. For instance, I was writing how Doug and I followed the Arthur Fromer book, Europe on $5 a Day.
I did too.
It worked.
1972, my buddy and I spent the summer over there, and $5 a day when we could eat like,
Later it went 10 to 15 a day, and then it became 40 to 50
Now, what year
would
this have been? You and Doug were...
66 was our year.
Okay.
Well, the point is, that book told us where to go, what to do. We used it as a guide, and so
you're talking about the Internet, so you were able to...
going back to the Internet, I don't want to get sidetracked. See, now, for instance, Doug and I, when we were in Paris, we toured the sewers of Paris, which at that time, 7:30 in the morning, you had to be there. You get on a boat, you go down a staircase down underground, you get in a boat, and for a mile you ride through the sewers, and don't put your hands in the water because it's not water.
It's sewage.
It's brown sewage.
Okay.
There was even a sign down there that says something like Jean Valjean was here from Les Miserables. But these are the sewers that supposedly Jean Valjean had carried Marius through to save his life during the Revolution. Well, where am I going to get a picture of that? Doug and I didn't take many pictures of each other on the trip because if I hand you the camera, you might run off with it. Oh. My dad's camera. Anyway.
I hadn't thought about that.
I went on the Internet. I typed in Google, Paris Sewer Tour 1966.
Yeah.
And bam, up comes photos, black and white, of people standing in line, people in the boats. And I was able to incorporate that in the story. And Fromer says, you've got to be there at 7:30 that morning.
Because it fills up otherwise.
And that was the day we went to see a magician in a nightclub. And we didn't get back into our hotel room till 1 in the morning. And we've got to be at that thing at 7:30 in the morning. And we were, because we were 19 and 20. He was 19, I was 20. And the tour was over in 10 minutes. But what a memory. And then all these years later, I see Les Miserables and in movies and the musical and going like, I was there.
He was there, yeah.
And Doug was there. And I wonder if our clothes smelled after the tour.
Well, how did you meet Doug to begin with? I mean, how did that association come about? I mean, he's from Canada and you're from Georgia. I mean, goodness sakes.
Yeah, we were both at New York IBM convention in '64, and we never met each other. Weird.
Yeah.
We talked about that later. The following year, there was a Southeastern Magicians Convention in Chattanooga.
Mm-hmm.
That was like August of '65, and we met each other. Doug was wearing a sport coat, basically short hair, combed with the Brill Cream look, and he wore glasses.
Did you have a mustache, I think, back then?
No mustache.
No?
No,
Okay.
no facial hair. And we met. We started talking about what he did, what I did, back and forth. And we got to the key point. One of us said, well, I'm going to go on a tour of Europe next summer. And the other one said, and I don't know which one said it, well, so am I. And then one of us said, why don't we just go together?
Mm-hmm.
It was like, bing. And so we started corresponding after that, phone calls, planned the whole thing, booked the tickets. He had to come a week later than so I visited some relatives in Scotland before he showed up. That's when the real trip started, when we were together.
Yeah.
And we did all those things that you read in the linking ring from June of 21 to March. They're 10 installments, pretty much true. I polished some of them up. I didn't tell some things that we shouldn't tell.
Well, I was about to say, there are some things outside that
we did not do anything really bad.
Yeah, but there are some things perhaps that weren't part of the story that you read.
Yeah.
I mean, people can go to the linking ring and read those, but can you share any stories that perhaps you didn't have time to write about, or something that was not included?
There's some things I just didn't want to mention.
Can you talk about it here or not? No?
No, I'd rather not
Okay.
talk about them here.
Okay.
If indeed I write, I think after I finish the book I'm on, good Lord willing, I'll write another book along that line, but it'll be more of a memoir with some good tricks in it, but it'll have more stories about this.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that you just wouldn't want to put in the linking ring due to political correctness, but the story I told is pretty much what happened. I'm still wondering, when we met these two, we were practically teenagers. I was only 20 by 3 weeks.
Oh.
So we're teenagers, and it's 11 o'clock at night, waiting to get on the midnight train from Bergen, Norway, back down to Copenhagen, 10-hour train ride. And here are two attractive 60s mini-skirted Norwegian girls in the train station at 11 o'clock at night.
And they were 60 they were older?
And they're like 17 years old.
Oh, okay.
And Doug and I are showing them magic tricks. And all these years later, I wonder why they were there. Why were they walking around the train station? I do not know the answer. You can make up an answer if you want to, but they wanted to know if they could go with us. Said not this time.
They wanted to travel with you or just be with you for the night?
To get on the train and go with us if we paid for it.
Of course.
And I think we had a compartment reserved, a sleeping compartment. Those berths are a little bit small, so
and they knew that.
4 people in our compartment, and we didn't want to get into anything that we would be embarrassed about later. So we just said goodbye. And,
yeah.
But he showed them the thumb fun trick where you stick your thumb on a little piece of paper and you make their card appear. And they were squealing, just like I wrote in the article. They were jumping up and down.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of like a flirtation thing, the whole thing.
Well, I would think that they would probably jump and squeal just about everything, it sounded like, because they were...
Yeah, of course. And we were... They spoke some English, you know, and we were American boys. So.
Did you show magic around as you were traveling at different stops and restaurants? And did you get free stuff, like free dinners?
Showed us tricks on the train. But one of the big things that happened was that we made it to the Netherlands, and we went to Hank Vermeiden's magic shop.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And met him, and he was very nice to us. Mm-hmm. And after we'd been talking for 10 minutes, he said, are you guys going to the convention?
And of course, you say, what convention?
What convention? He says, in 2 weeks from now, there's a convention in Italy, and he told us where. He says, I'm going. There'll be people from all over Europe. And we, on the spot, changed our itinerary so that we could route ourselves to that town in Italy on the day the convention started. And Hank Vermaiden made us a hotel reservation. You know, he fixed it all up for us, and never saw him after that. But he was very kind to us. He became, I think he was a president of FISM.
FISM, that's right, he was. And also he was known, I believe, as a consultant and magic teacher.
Yes.
As well. So.
But very nice guy to us. And, of course, there we met Pavel and saw him do blow tie. Remember that the trick where you blow the 3 silks out of the tube?
Yes.
They come down and tie together. He showed that in his lecture, which was in French in Italy. So they had an Italian translator, and he spoke French. So how was I to understand that?
Well, that is a very good trick. In fact, speaking of trick, that Trixie Bond markets that. She does that as part of her show.
Doug had some French, being Canadian, you know, they're bilingual country.
Yeah.
And he leans over to me and said, he's using those little rubber bands you put on braces. You know, people wear braces, got to have little rubber bands.
Right.
I go, oh. And so, you know, we went home. It was shown. It was not for sale. It was just shown a technique. And I went home and used it for 6 years before it came on the market. I did it everywhere.
Yeah.
So we just had all kind of great adventures. We sat around. We only found 4 or 5 people who spoke English at that convention, but one of them was Fred Capps. So we sat around one night and talked to Fred Capps.
Wow, what an experience!
I told that story in the book. We met the guy in the hallway in Paris. The guy who played Jim Bowie on TV. You know, with the big Bowie knife.
Big Bowie knife, yeah.
We got a lot of fun. We didn't know what we were doing, except learning.
So that was just one summer of magic immersion, and you met other magicians along the way, as you said, and everything then too.
Yep.
And so in later years, obviously you continued, I guess, correspond with him. And then when he hit it big in '75 on Christmas Eve or whenever that this television show was, I know Chip Romero saying, "Scott, don't you remember?" If he's listening to this, because Chip Romero is the Doug Henning guy, of course.
Chip knows the exact date, but we met one fellow in Copenhagen who invited us out to his house the next night. We went to his house and had something to drink and talked magic for 2 or 3 hours with him and his wife. And over 50 years later, I went over there to do a little mini tour of the Scandinavian countries.
Yeah.
And he picked me up at the airport, and I reminded him about who it was who was really at his house. And that happened several times. That I said to another guy, I said, "Do you remember these 2 college students coming to see you back in that summer?" He said, "Vaguely, yeah." I said, "Well, I was one of them, but the other one was Doug Henning." He couldn't believe it. You know, so you never know.
He's got a story. Those people have stories, to tell then later.
I want to get into something about the website.
Yeah.
My website, and let me make this very plain up front. I don't try to sell anybody anything. I don't push magic on it. I don't want you to buy this. This is not a commercial. But a friend of mine who's here at this convention suggested this, 10 years ago. And about a year ago, my old website crashed and disappeared. It's gone. We don't want to get into the story about it, but it's gone. So Marty Hahn built me a new one last September. So it hasn't even been up a year, and we added all this stuff to it. There are commercial products, yes, for sale. You can order them, but there's more. What I've added in there, well, there's something like 200 videos that are teaching videos.
Okay.
Teaching you how to do tricks or showing you performances. There are videos of people like some of these people I met on that European tour and saw at that convention. I found videos of them, and they're posted on the site. You can watch them for free. There are over 100 things to read. There are complete books. Some of my out-of-print books are on there. Books that are long out of print. There's a book, a gospel magic book there from 1924. I found the manuscript. I put it free on the site. So there are free things to read and study. A half a dozen lectures. I've got a Bev Bergeron lecture that he did. I've got a very short.
That was the
Edwin
one that has
Hooper.
the cross or tic-tac-toe thing in it, is it?
No,
Okay, because he had another set of lecture
it's
notes.
Snakes and Stage.
Oh, okay.
Rebo.
Gotcha. Yep, never mind.
I got a short lecture of Edwin Hooper, the mastermind behind Supreme Magic, doing a lecture.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all on the website free. And the website, by the way, is called GinnMagicShop.com. Ginn, my last name, Ginn, GinnMagicShop.com. And you just go to the home page, scroll to the bottom, past the products, and here are all these categories. Good reads, free lectures, free books, interesting videos, strange pictures. You get some humor in that one.
Okay.
I have a photo collage of my mentors in magic, another photo collage of 50 floating photos, including David Copperfield floating a girl while Copperfield is standing on a table and she's floating in the air.
Yeah.
And sitting below looking is Ab Dixon, Max Maven, I forgot who else, and David's parents are sitting there. But these are all free things.
Yeah.
So you can go to the website and learn stuff that you can study and use and not pay a cent.
And again, that's called Ginn
GinnMagicShop.com.
Okay.
Yep. I wanted to point that out because what I wanted to do with the website, since we had to redo the whole thing, is I wanted to give back. You know, I've been blessed with a lot of people sharing with me.
Mm-hmm.
Harold Taylor, Mark Wilson. That's another whole story, how I worked for Mark Wilson for 2 weeks when I was in college.
2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Like at a theme park? Or
he
were
came
you
to the Southeastern Fair in Atlanta, was one assistant short. They called the Magic Club. Do you have like a college student who could come work? They called me at school, said, can you get out? I said, yes. I did not consult anybody. I just said yes.
Of course you do.
And I called up my mom and dad and say, I'm going to come home for 10 days in October and work for Mark Wilson. And I went to my professors. If a professor, and none of them did, first of all, at the time, they knew who Mark Wilson was because he'd been on network TV for 5 years.
Yeah.
And they knew that I was a magician. So none of them put any stops on me. They told me what to do. I said, I'll be gone. I'll be back here. And I worked as the low man on the totem pole assistant. Mm-hmm. But we had a lot of adventures. I wrote some of those adventures in the February and March issues of the Linking Ring of 21. I went with Bev Bergeron, the Rebo, down to see the Girl to Gorilla. I wrote a whole story about that. Mm-hmm. That was an experience. And about Mark Wilson floating the very heavy person.
Okay.
We couldn't say this in the Linking Ring. We were trying to be PC, but she was a very large lady.
Yeah.
And it ruined the Super X. It bent the thing, and one of the other guy assistant and I had to pack it up and ship it back to California.
Well, who put her on there? Was it Mark's fault or who?
She was the president of an organization.
Oh, so they insisted they have her.
They wanted him to float the president, and he didn't look at her ahead of time.
I see.
And when Bev looked out there and saw her,
he knew.
He knew we were in trouble.
Yeah.
So we got the picture taken, but we shipped it back to California, and that was 1968. I was out of the castle in 2018, mm-hmm. and I went to visit Mark and Nani and son Greg.
Yeah.
And one of the things I said to him, I said, whatever happened to that Super X?
Because this is a big hunk of metal.
It was, steel.
Yeah.
He said, David, we never could fix it. We literally took it out back and threw it in the dumpster.
Wow.
He said, however, we built one later that completely folded up and went into a suitcase so we could go to China and do the Super X in China. Mm-hmm. But it was engineered so it fit in one suitcase and didn't weigh over 50 pounds. And they showed that to me. And
it was also, I assume, able to accommodate a little bit larger load.
Yeah. A Super X is supposed to hold
about 150, right?
150. Mm-hmm. I would never put anybody. The girls I did on one way back, 105, 110, 115, right in there.
You're using small children for the most part, and also the same thing. Like, what is that one? The floating Indian princes or whatever with the that you got that little trifold thing and you move that out of the way, and she's on a sword or something.
The Princess Flying Carpet.
Yeah, Flying Carpet. That's also
I saw
like
one here at the convention, and the guy who bought it has a little girl she's 12, but she's a small 12.
Mm-hmm.
She's a sixth grader.
Because that's something it does.
Because she can sit on there, cross her legs. It
Right.
looks real cute.
Mm-hmm.
I've used one of those at a birthday party.
But you never did tour with that on your school shows?
I used it in school shows for 1 year.
Oh, just 1 year.
I used to try to. My show changed every year,
Mm-hmm.
and so I try to carry something different every year. And I picked up one used at a Magic Club auction, and performed it every show for 1 year.
What about library shows? Were those a big deal when you were really in your prime? As far as they are today.
I did some back in '78 and '9, and then sometime in the late '80s, I started doing a whole lot. I started marketing for them,
Mm-hmm.
And now a lot of people are doing them.
Yeah,
In the Atlanta area, I bet there are 10 different magicians.
right. Making a living
and
of
a
that.
lot of other kind of performers. Ken Scott, Arthur Atzba, Bill Packard. Some of them are at the convention here. They're doing them.
But you were one of the groundbreakers, I assume, in that.
Yeah, I would say so. One summer I worked 82 of them. I think Ken Scott's done like 110. But about 4 years ago, I just got tired. This is before the pandemic. I got tired of loading and unloading in 95-degree weather in Georgia.
Yeah.
You get into the library, it's air conditioned, fine. When the show's over, by the time I load it out, I'm dripping wet.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm over 70 years old now. It's time to back out of something. And I just decided voluntarily, I don't want to do those anymore.
The library shows. You're still doing
I'm not
assemblies?
doing library shows.
But you're doing school assemblies?
Not really.
Okay.
I'm doing a few shows here and there.
You pick and choose.
But the pandemic kind of put the school assemblies to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I've been doing this for over 50 years.
You don't need to, but you still like to.
I was in the Army until I was 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So the pandemic has made it easy to stay home and do mail order and shoot videos down there of products that I'm selling and do the occasional show. Now, I do not like to do Zoom shows, though.
Why not?
There's your audience. That brick wall right there.
Brick wall.
That's your audience.
Okay.
Did they laugh? Did they clap? Did they react in any way?
Because they're muted, you can't tell.
Yeah.
I see.
So I did about 4 the first year, and I was not happy. I spent a lot more time getting ready for them than I would for a normal show.
Yeah.
And it just didn't pay off inside of me. It was not even a money thing. If you'd said, David, I got 10 Zoom shows and pay you $1,000 each, I would say, no, thank you.
Wow. Okay.
I didn't feel good inside of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's not as interactive as you would want it to be.
Live audience
Yeah.
is what I want to do.
Exactly. You mentioned earlier when we were talking before we started chatting here online on the microphone, and that is about John Booth and your relationship with him and how that he had inspired you then also to start writing, and the books that he had written that you kind of patterned your initial book after then too.
John Booth's book, Marvels of Mystery, was the first great book of magic I ever read, cover to cover, and repeated readings.
Mm-hmm.
And learning the tricks, he was writing from experience. Everything in there he did, show after show.
Mm-hmm.
When I wrote my first book in college, I was a grad student, Colorful Magic, and came out in '69. I told John Booth later when I met him at the castle, that is my version of Marvels of Mystery. I was trying to do the same thing you did because you were my mentor without even knowing me. I was trying to write from experience, and that's the way I've pretty much done all of my writing my whole career, written from experience. And I'm not the guy who will make up a trick today and publish it tomorrow.
Right.
I make the trick up, and then I put it through 300 school shows, and I polish it or I toss it out. And
have there been things that you have created and just didn't like or didn't think it was worthy of
Sure.
publishing?
Yeah, it just didn't. So I don't write about those things unless there's a point to be made.
Sure.
And the point would be don't do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
So I've tried to write from experience, and as Mario the Maker Magician said in his show the other day, when his teacher told him as a kid, when you grow up, do what you love. Well, that's the way it's turned out for me. My hobby of magic at age 12 turned into my occupation.
Sure.
But I didn't count on the writing. And
you had a journalism background, by the way?
Journalism background.
As I recall,
and that
yeah.
helped with
I
the
thought so.
writing. But, you know, the writing is also, it's inside of me. I'm a big reader. I'm never without reading a book, and sometimes I read several at one time. But all of that helps me be a better writer.
Sure.
And the other really important thing I learned in college in one of my English courses was the concept of writing the way you talk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I do. A guy said to me one time, he said, I've read several of your books and I could not understand the lingo, the way you said the words in your books. And then I heard you lecture and I realized that you're writing the way you talk. I say, exactly.
Yeah.
Because if I can stand up here and talk and explain to you how to do this silk trick, and I write it down the same way, somebody can read it without knowing me and read it and understand.
Yeah, if you can understand it in a lecture the way I'm explaining it with words, verbally, then you should be able to.
That's very important. In fact, I'm right now reading the memoir by James Patterson, who is technically the best-selling
writer
author
currently
in the world.
Yeah.
And he starts out by saying, I write the way I talk. I'm going, well, of course. I've read probably a dozen of his books over the years.
Sure.
And they're very easy to read because he's doing what I've just said. He's writing the way he talks.
Right. So. I think I've heard this before. There are some people who are keynote speakers who have books they sell that have essentially been transcribed from some of their lectures. Yeah. So as they have been talking, they have been recorded, and then they have gone voice to text, basically. So it is as if you are reading or listening to them because it is as they speak.
Well, and of course, if it's a magic routine, I'm writing up the way I did it in the show, and so I'm writing my words that I spoke during the show.
Do you record those shows, or did you?
Then, oh, yeah, occasionally.
Okay. So how do you remember after a show's over?
I've got the long memory.
Oh, that's right.
And you do the show.
Yeah.
You do the show 300-400 times. Well, you know, there are parts of shows that I could.
But there are things that happen then, David, where a kid yells out something or there's something improvisational that happens. So in those situations, immediately afterwards, do you jot those down so you don't forget them?
Sometimes, or I just remember them. You know,
what a memory.
I've got a kid in the Arrowhead box.
Okay.
And I've got a microphone with an on-off switch.
Yeah.
So I turn to him and say, before I close the doors and do this, is there anything you'd like to say? And one kid goes, help! And I drive away from that school going, how could I make that happen? Well, you just switch the mic off and say to him out loud on the mic, is there anything you'd like to say before I close the doors? Click the switch off and whisper, say help. And 95% of them do.
Yeah.
And that's the way I've developed some routines that these things happen in the show, and then you incorporate them in the show.
You make those improvisational things happen.
Sure. And then I write them into the books and say, this is what happened. And if you're doing the routine with this particular magic prop, you don't have to go through this. Follow what happened to me and just do it that way. And I've had people tell me that they did exactly that. And
now, we mentioned the libraries a little bit earlier. We start to wrap up over here. Are there some shows that you or groups you prefer to work for over your time of life that you look back, I really enjoyed performing for Boy Scouts, or I like working for Girl Scouts? Or
the last 20 years, about 20 years ago, I said, I don't want to work anymore. Middle schools, high schools are too problematic. I certainly don't want to work any scout shows. I don't want to work any nighttime shows.
That kind of narrows it down.
With my wife, with my family. So I concentrated on purpose and marketed only to elementary schools, kindergarten to the 5th grade, and church preschools, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. I found where I live that the church preschool children were better behaved than children at a daycare center.
Interesting.
Who have only one parent and who are drug around and
dropped off,
not nurtured.
Yeah.
So I stopped doing daycare centers. This is where I live. It may be different where you live. So I concentrated just on those markets, those three. Well, excuse me, schools, elementary schools, church preschools, and the third one was the library market. And as I've already said, I've backed out of that now. I've bowed out formally.
Children are different. I thought it was a fascinating book and lecture that David Kay had given as Silly Billy, in talking about how that you can do the same trick different ways because of different ages that will react differently. You know, like I've seen that before, but that doesn't mean they don't want to see it again. It's kind of like that familiarity.
And you know, he works more parties.
True, he's a birthday party guy. And do you find birthday parties to be different from school assemblies?
I do an occasion. Oh, well, yeah, because at birthday parties you don't necessarily have crowd control. Look at the school; they're sitting with their teachers.
Good point.
The principal is there. A kid cuts up in one of my school shows, he's taken out.
Corrected. Correct.
He's disciplined. I had a little girl one time, 10-year-old, in front of 300 kids, in front of half the school. I handed her the magic wand. She just threw it down on the floor. I thought she dropped it. I picked it up, handed it back to her. She just threw it down on the floor again. I realized I had a problem.
Yeah.
And I sped up the routine, got rid of her as quick as I could.
Yeah.
After the show, they brought her up to me and made her apologize. A week later, I get a letter from her.
Wow.
Instigated by her teacher and her parents, apologizing to me.
That wouldn't happen at the birthday party.
You've got to be a really foolish child to act up in front of the entire school the way she did. I don't know to this day why she did such a thing, because to me, it's an honor for me to bring you up onto my stage to help me.
Yeah.
I'm doing you a favor. I'm putting you in the spotlight.
Right. I'm making you famous amongst your friends, because when you go back, you were the one on stage they're talking to. Suddenly you were famous, that child, because you brought them up.
A girl told me, a 35-year-old lady told me one time she had hired me for a couple of her church preschools. She was a director. She said, when I was 14, I went to this school program, took my little brother on a Saturday morning. It was a magic show. It was you. And you got me up and did Arrowhead. You put the arrows through my head and brought me out alive. And she said, for the next year, people jokingly called me Arrowhead, the Arrowhead girl.
Yeah.
She said, but it gave me status.
Sure.
I was the Arrowhead girl who had survived, and it made me cool. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right. That's
And
my point. I don't
She grew up to be a very beautiful lady, very attractive, and hired me twice. So...
See, that's why it was unusual that little girl threw down. She
how
must
to
have had
pick
some
up
other
girls
issues.
By sticking arrows through their head.
Yeah.
But I never went at it from that point of view.
Well, that's another title for a book. Well, listen, as we wrap up the podcast, the name of it is called The Magic Word Podcast, and so I always like to close by asking my guests, what is it that is your philosophy of life?
Philosophy of life.
What is it that you live by? When you wake up in the morning, what drives you? What's important in your life?
It's fun. I mean, you're asking me top of the head. I haven't had a chance to think about
right.
this.
I mean, you live by a certain code, a certain credo, that something that is important.
This is a cliche.
It's not a word. It's just whatever.
The cliche is, if you enjoy what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Right.
Well, I do work. I saw my grandfather work, my father work.
And work hard.
I have a work ethic.
Yeah.
I'm not a workaholic, I don't think. My wife might not agree. But I think about magic on a regular basis, on a daily basis, and I wake up with something to do every day. It's write on the next book,
right?
Fill the mail orders, take stuff to the post office. I'm always busy.
So work one day at a time, kind of.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whistle while you work. But I'd say the bottom line is I have been very blessed with the ability to perform magic, to write about it, and to present it in live lectures. And those three things just became my lifelong snowball.
Yeah.
And I've been blessed with the ability to entertain children of all kinds and shapes and colors. And basically, when I finish a show, to some degree, they love me. I've had children marching out of a school break out of line and run over and hug me after a show, just out of the clear blue.
That's
Nothing
great.
I did to instigate it.
Yeah.
Because they just love me.
Is there a tagline or something you say as you close your show every time? And
Not in the real shows, but I do say something important in my lecture, and I've been saying this for about 20 years, and I say, I talk about entertaining children is more important than fooling them. Mm-hmm. But I say, may God bless you and every child you entertain, because nothing good you do for children is ever wasted.
Wow. Now see,
and that's
those
a
are
little
magic
bit of
words.
Harold Taylor, but it's something I picked up years ago, mm-hmm. and the idea that everything I do, first of all, is good for children.
Sure.
It either teaches them or it entertains them. And so everything good that I do for children is never wasted. It goes on and on.
Wow. That's moving. Thank you very much, David. I appreciate your time. It's been wonderful catching up.
Well, it's been fun. and I'm sure we've left out a few things.
Well, and perhaps there might be some people who will write in and say, hey, you should have asked him about this or that, and perhaps we might be able to get together again in the future time.
Good enough questions, we'll do it again.
We'll do it again. Until next time.
Well,
thank you very much. That was David Ginn, and this is Scotty Out. Wow, this has been a fun one. Thank you very much, David, for being my guest this week. I have enjoyed our conversation, and also I'm sure the listeners got a lot out of this then as well. David really is one of our national treasures, and he is someone who should be revered in our community because of what he has contributed and continues to contribute. As he mentioned, he has a regular column called Magic and Memories in the Linking Ring. If you're a member of the International Brotherhood of Magicians, be sure to check out his column each month. Very good articles that he writes, and again, picks up some things about Doug Henning that are very interesting stories I think that you would enjoy. And also, again, I want to put in a plug for you to go and check out his website at ginnmagicshop.com. Well, thank you again, listeners, for tuning in this week and also for subscribing to the Pod Letter. And what? You don't already subscribe? Gosh, join the over 1,000 people who have already subscribed to the Pod Letter and find out from week to week who it is coming on each week and also who's coming up and some suggestions from the archives. Just like this week, I had suggested an episode that we did with the late David Hinken and also then with Julian Franklin, in which we talk about school shows and libraries. This was something that was, almost 8 years ago, I guess around 2014. Anyhow, that one is recommended that you go back and hear that. David was an old Ronald McDonald, in fact. So they have a lot to talk about that as well. So if you enjoy performing for children, I think you'd enjoy that, and also others that are in the archive. So again, subscribe to the Pod Letter, and you can find out about some of those things then as well. There will not be an episode, by the way, next week. I wanted to let you know that we are celebrating Thanksgiving in the United States, and so I want to give time off for you to enjoy the time with your family without having to take any time during the day to have to download and listen to another one of my podcasts here and my ramblings and my conversations. And so it'll give you a chance maybe to get caught up on some of the past episodes. But we've got some other things coming up that are going to be pretty exciting as we get into the holidays. We will have some holiday gift buying suggestions coming up on the 1st of December. So I'll give you a little sneak preview there. But in the meantime, no episode next week since it will be Thanksgiving here in the United States. And so I want each of you to enjoy your time with your friends and family and also to give thanks for everything that you have. Which brings us to the end of this week's episode, which I say, stay well, get booked, and may God bless you and every child you entertain, because nothing good you ever do for children is wasted. This is Scotty Out.